It is the next round of the ABB FIA Formula E World Championship. Welcome to Miami as we kick off free practice 2, as it's quite a representative session to decide who is going to be hot and who is going to be not ahead of qualifying later on today. It will just be the world feed that will take you through the part of the session. So we'll hand you over to our commentary team of the world feed with Tom Brooks and Billy Munger.
Venues, longest track on the Formula E calendar, and given FP1 yesterday, it looks like a tricky place to drive an FE car.
Seems like it's really tricky to make the rear tyres hang on for the entire lap when you're pushing in your maximum power. And I think we're going to see a lot of action today in terms of how the teams are going to go about making sure that the rear tyres last from FP1, things that they've learned. But let's not forget, they've had 8 weeks to learn about the Gen 3 Evo, about all the systems, all the things that they learned in those first 4 races. I think we're going to see a bit of a change in the order here today. Yeah,
turn 8 being a crucial overtaking zone. We saw a few drivers locking up and going off down there as well. Turns 10 and 11, tight chicane. Then through the final series of corners, turn 12 and turn 13 in particular, catching a few drivers out. Very blind in particular, Billy, into that turn 12, and we saw a few cutting the grass on the outside.
Yeah, also it narrows down quite a lot onto the entry there, so it does provide a real challenge for the drivers, and I think it'll be an area that we continue to see mistakes, to be honest.
Certainly will. So, as we know, Oliver Rowland leads the Drivers' Championship, 17 points to the advantage of the rookie Taylor Barnard, who has been incredible in his full-time debut season with Neil McLaren. Of course, he made 2 outings in season 10, replacing the injured Sam Bird, but very impressive so far for the youngster, and he still has the possibility of becoming the youngest ever race winner. Ollie Rowland, though, as we said, on emphatic form. Here he is, ready to get suited and booted into the car. And excited to see what he can do this weekend. Yeah,
tough day for him yesterday. He struggled a lot. He was at the back of the timesheets and really looked like for the first time this year he was in a difficult spot. So hopefully he can get back on top of it today.
Yeah, we heard him on team radio actually talking about the car, it seemed like there was some kind of problem with it. So whether there was a technical issue there, still not 100% sure on that. But hopefully he's able to start off what is the most important day, of course, being that we've got a qualifying and the race later on, in good form, and hopefully to turn around that disappointment of FP1.
I think for him as well, it's important to note that his teammate Norman Nato was 7th in FP1, and Ollie has been consistently outperforming him so far in this season. So as much as, yes, they might not have gone well for him, he knows that if he can get it all together, he's got a decent package underneath him.
Certainly does. Well, green light then is on. Free practice 2 gets underway here at the Homestead Miami Speedway. Cars filtering out of the pit lane and onto the circuit for the first time. Just after 7:30 local time this morning. A lot cooler in terms of the weather conditions compared to a bit faster.
Thing to see. I think that about optimizing, and then of course it's going to be completely different later on when the sun really, and we get those really hot beating moments on the track.
So what do you think the teams are going to be able to learn from FP2 this morning, given the fact it's going to be
one and on those, maximum 350 kilowatts 4-wheel drive laps they're going to be so important to get into the duels today.
You see how wide it is on this straight here, Billy, coming down into turn 8. I mean, there's a good possibility, given that we were expecting this to be a very energy critical race, we could see 3, maybe 4 wide.
I was looking at that thinking we could maybe even see 5. Honestly, it is proper wide for a Formula E. In the braking zones, just trying to keep that minimum speed.
The weekend for Nick Cassidy fastest in FP1. He was ahead of his team. Second. Very impressive start for Nick Cassidy, given the fact that he's not had a particularly brilliant season 11 so far.
No, but Jaguar, in general, they had a pretty poor start to the season in terms of qualifying. Their race pace has been great. you know, all throughout this season, as they were super strong last year. But their one-lap pace, they've been really struggling, and it seems like they've got on top of that. They've used these 8 weeks to really work hard. I know that James Barkley was in the simulator, believe it or not,
right.
So I believe that he could have made all the difference.
Okay, so the plan is out, build, push, call, pushing up. Track temp is
Maybe they go for a strategy they got from
19 degrees. Yesterday it was 38 when we finished.
I beg your pardon for interrupting. I was just thinking maybe they go for a strategy they got from James Barkley in his sim work, perhaps.
No, they've got, yeah, going for a push, cool push there. So there'll be a 300 kilowatt push, cool push. And that'll be focusing on making sure that they can get through to the duels. But they're also there, the engineer giving the information to Nick that it's 19 degrees colder, the track temperature, than it was yesterday. So that's going to significantly impact how he goes about his outlap, how he prepares the tyres, and as he's getting ready to launch the lap now.
It's incredible, really, given Cassidy's performances over the last couple of seasons with Envision, with Jaguar, and especially how he ended season 10, that he didn't score any points until the second race in Jeddah last time out. I mean, I know he's had some misfortunes. Obviously, Brazil, he was unlucky to get caught up in incidents and so on. But yeah, again, not the start of the season that he wanted. But given the long break that we've had, Billy, you know, it's been what, 6 weeks since we were last out at Jeddah. He's had the opportunity to kind of reset, go again, and start now from scratch again.
Yeah, I think for Nick it was the perfect break at the perfect time, because when you're in that sort of you haven't got that momentum, you've been struggling to get to grips with, you know, picking up the big points at the start of the season. Sometimes it's just good for someone. I feel like Nick's quite that person that really rides at like the confidence high. So that 8-week gap is giving him a chance to really get his head into the data, crunch the numbers, look where he's been missing out. And I'm sure he'll be knowing going into this weekend really clearly in his head what he needs to do on a personal level. And then obviously the other factors come into play. He's going to just have to focus on his own performance.
Yeah, I think all the drivers have had a bit of a reset, and it's going to be interesting to see who comes out on top after this 8-week break.
So we're watching Antonio Felix da Costa here, just going through turn 4. This is where the attack mode will be activated in the race. You can see that on the outside. One thing I did notice when I was walking the track yesterday, loads of lovely camber on the inside of that corner. You can sort of roll it through, but as you get to the attack mode on the top, that sort of camber drops away. It's incredibly different sort of lines, and I think the attack loss time, if you will, it's going to be a bit more significant, but it also then converges onto the racing line naturally, given the way the corner goes.
Yeah, I think this year we've not seen it be so much of an issue, because once you get into the attack mode and you've got your four-wheel drive, your 350 kilowatts, you can literally drive around the outside of the people. And I think that this circuit's going to lend itself to a lot of overtaking when you're in the attack mode. So what you're going to lose versus what you're going to gain is still going to be significant. So so yes, you are going to lose, but you are going to be having the opportunity to overtake everyone.
Next lap is push 300. Next lap, push 300.
Push 300 there for Nick.
Yep, so that's a standard power lap essentially. You've got 350 kilowatts in full attack. A big snap of oversteer there through the first corner. You can see it drops off, you get a big compression off of the banking. Then we head on to the infield section, so we're just hooking it up through turns 3 and 4. Talk us through this one here, Billy.
Yeah, I mean, they're just coming into this attack mode zone now that you mentioned earlier, the nice bit of camber running through turns 4 and 5 there, and then they've got the long run down into turn 6. Again, one of the bigger braking zones on this circuit. It gets really narrow, actually, the way that the track's been set up here. The wall moves in, it's not as wide as the usual setup that most other series would use. And then again, going down into turn 8, a place where we saw a few mistakes yesterday. Let's see how Nick Cassidy fares going into here on a 300 kilowatt push lap. Nice and late on the brakes, rolling that minimum speed through, which is so important in Formula E. Traffic clearing his way as he's on the way out of the corner, and then back onto the banking for the tight chicane here. And the change of surface on the exit here I think is quite interesting. We're actually through the middle of the corner. There's a slight bit of a ramping there in terms of the exit, so that will help to keep the car in to the inside of the circuit and away from the wall. And then again through these last few fast corners where the car was moving around a lot yesterday for a lot of drivers, a few mistakes creeping in. The final little chicane onto the banking. How does the car handle that? It almost settles the car down when they get to that banking. They always, you can see them fighting the wheel. As soon as they get to that, it plants the tyres into the surface, gives them an extra bit of grip, and they can get it all together.
Yeah, good lap there from Nick Cassidy going to the top of the pile. First sort of representative lap time that we've got in the session actually for Cassidy, 1:26. Still a fair way off of where we were with the full attack mode laps yesterday. Let's have another look at that snap through the first couple of corners. Just clipped the grass by the looks of things, didn't he, going through there? You see the compression, it's incredibly tight. And it, yeah, just hooked the car up, didn't it, on the bump?
Yeah, so that was a nice piece of grass at the beginning of yesterday, and I know that I asked Jamie about this because she's raced here, and she said you don't want to cut it too much because if you do, it wears out quite quickly and it throws the car off, and that was a great example of that.
This is something I wanted to talk about as well, traffic, because this is here, Taylor Barnard with the two Lola Yamaha Apt cars right in front of him. Now, I know, of course, we're in practice, there's more cars on track than we're going to have at any point during qualifying, but some of the corners here are so blind, there is a good possibility that you could see drivers being impeded.
Well, you can do. I mean, you know, the nature of the game when you've got to slow down, cool down your tyres, get everything right, I think you are going to see some people being impeded, but also you arrive so much quicker.
On the team radio at that point, so they'll be hoping to senior race engineer at Neon McLaren, and he'll be working with Taylor Barnard on that side of the garage. On the other side, Stephen Lane, the race engineer for Sam Bird. Sam Bird currently 10th fastest at the moment. Just looking here at Stoffel van Dorn. Hughes especially was able to do in Jeddah. He got himself onto the podium there, and it's good to get those a little bit more as we get
getting those that's where obviously you can then put yourself right in the shop window for fighting for the championship. As we've seen from the likes of Taylor Barnard, Oliver Rowland, they've been consistently, when they score points, scoring the big points.
Absolutely. Here is Jay Penske, then DS Penske's team principal. Of course, a home race for them. Here is Tommaso Volpe, Nissan leading the team's championship, leading the drivers' championship. All of that work pretty much, in fact, down to Oliver Rowland in the factory Nissan camp at least. So far, Norman Nato not getting off the point-scoring board. And we know that Sergio Sette Camara is going to be jumping into that seat. Well, it's not confirmed. We're fairly confident that's going to happen because he is reserve driver for Nissan, and he'll be jumping into that seat in Berlin. Do you think there's a possibility that Nato's going to need to look over his shoulder if he's not able to get off the points in the next couple of weekends, James?
I mean, look, he's not the only one that we've seen have a couple of difficult races to start the season. You know, a few minutes ago we were just saying that Nick Cassidy also had a difficult start to the season. So Norman was fast yesterday. He's P2 right now. You know, I think he needs a little bit of time to settle in. I think there's still some new things, and he should get up to speed.
Push 350 in. Push 350 in. Scenario 9 when you're ready. Scenario 9 when you're ready.
So that's the lap that Sam Bird is on now. You can see him there on an attack mode lap. And he's now got four-wheel drive power and an extra 50 kilowatts underneath in the car. It's so visible, the difference between a car on a 300 to 350 kilowatt lap. There's just so much more traction with the four-wheel drive. But the car just looks so much more hooked up, and Bird now trying to start pushing the limits here.
Yeah, it's incredibly impressive when you've got the four-wheel drive and 350 kilowatts. Cars are so fast now.
Down in towards turn 8 there, you can see the sun quite low overhead given the early time of day that we're at here this morning, but Bird pushing on, setting good sector times. Probably envisions they're just going off onto the runoff area, making sure that they re-emerge back onto the track. It's quite a sharp jink over to the right-hand side following that chicane, actually. You've got to be very careful that you don't, if you do run on, you don't end up compromising somebody else's lap.
Yeah, I think this is why the drivers are actually running on there. So actually a smart choice from some of the drivers there.
Seeing Bird coming in at the end of that lap there, going straight into the pits. Teammate has set the fastest lap with now using that 350 kilowatts, 1:23.9, so a couple of tenths slower than what we saw in FP1 yesterday. So the track is very fast for so early on in the session. Yeah,
we're keen to see, as we said, what that's going to look like when we get into qualifying later on this morning. It's slightly earlier schedule than we normally have in Formula E. Qualifying traditionally happens at about 20 past 10. It's actually starting before 10 o'clock this morning. So I wonder what conditions are going to look like in terms of the air temperature and indeed the track temperature. That's Max Günther exploring the limits out of turn 7. Just kicking up a bit of dust. Let's have another look. So he's out of turn 6, snap of oversteer on the apex, and then just runs out of tarmac.
This is a good example of having hot rear tyres where they've probably been hot from doing a few laps. He hasn't done a big enough cool down lap, and he's still pushing on. You know, just the rear getting away from him. He's chasing it the whole way through. So I think it's going to be very challenging for the rear tyres. You know, when we get through the hotter temperatures later on today, the drivers are really going to struggle to hang on to the rear for a whole lap.
It really looked yesterday like it was a handful driving a car around this track in these conditions. Of course, the track's going to rubber in a lot more, so it should get a bit grippy. But given the fact that, you know, we're not on slick tyres, these cars do inherently just move around a lot more compared to, you know, a single seat like an F2 or an F3 car. Yeah,
they move around on the tread blocks, so especially when the surface of the tyre gets too hot, that surface temperature is really important on those cool-down laps to try and reduce that as much as possible. That's the tricky part for the of knowing, you know, how much is enough, because also into the start of the next push lap, car underneath you for the it's really like a balance is to try and focus on to get right.
And of course, this is a really abrasive.
I went a bit wide in turn 1, a bit too deep, but the car is not bad. I was trying to update my braking, so I wouldn't change much.
Understood.
Well, Buemi there sounding a little bit happier compared to the balance of the car he had yesterday. He was slowest of all the drivers, some 3.1 seconds off the pace, but he said to his race engineer in FP1 the car was undrivable. So not the words you wanted to hear. They'll have been turning that inside out back to front. Well, when we look at race season 2, it was profound, wasn't it? Yeah. I think it's overall standings or something along the lines of that. Forgive me if I've got that a little bit wrong. They didn't manage to get a victory last year, but it never really hooked up. To the super and teammate Nick Cassidy, those two. I think we saw in F1 yesterday, Billy, was two working, almost doing their own pack race. In particular, from just, you know, alternating the drivers.
But they can obviously see the difference in efficiency when the two cars side by is pushing. Efficiency is something coming into this weekend. Everyone has been talking about it. It lends itself to that pack racing, like you've already mentioned there, Tom. Ooh, a little bit of a moment there for one of the Porsches. It looked like he was getting a bit close to the wall there on the exit. The car was really moving around as he got to the banking.
Well, I think Da Costa, it almost looked like he clipped the tyres on the inside of 15 there, and I think that just sent him wide, didn't it, towards the wall on the outside. Thankfully avoided it, but a bit of a warning sign nonetheless. Anyway, just under 24 minutes to go of the session. We were talking about the two Jaguars a few moments ago of Nick Cassidy and Mitch Evans. They're currently down in 18th and 19th place. But, as we said, really impressive performance from both Cassidy.
I'm quite happy. How was my last 350 lap?
Yeah, 350, that was good. Currently P1. I'll give you more feedback on the out.
So Barnard there, a bit of team radio with his race engineer. But yes, just go back to the Jaguar situation. Yeah, first and fourth yesterday for Nick Cassidy and for Mitch Evans. Strong.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. And as you said, a super impressive start for Jaguar yesterday, which come out the way of the cars coming into the pit lane here. And James, the break perhaps couldn't have come at a better time for the team, giving you the opportunity after a tricky start to the season to reset and work out what you guys can fix and do better.
Yeah, listen, it's been 4 races down, 1 win, but I think we've seen really good race pace, but we had some one-lap performance to find. So, yeah, that's what we focused our time on, but let's wait and see. It's a long season. We don't expect miracles in this game. You just got to kind of work hard and let the results do the speaking for us. So, yeah, good session yesterday, but a long way to go. And, yeah, we'll keep working away and hopefully close that gap. But all the ingredients, I think, are there for a really strong kind of race result. And we've seen that, obviously, in Sao Paulo at the start of the season. So just improving that one-lap pace has been key.
And what did you have the opportunity to do over that 8-week break?
Well, a lot back at the factory, basically. A lot of time to analyse the data, look at where we felt we could be stronger, where we were struggling. And that's the work that the team have been really hard at since the last race in Jeddah. We had some manufacturer testing as well to do, which is good. So yeah, it's been a chance to piece some things together. But like I said, it's not that simple. You have a good theory about what we could be, and we just work through our to-do list and see what we can validate has worked and where things haven't, and just chip away at it and hopefully close that gap. And it's very close. I mean, we're talking about a gap, but it's, you know, Mitch was a 10th of a second going through to the semi-finals in Jeddah, so we're very, very close, and formally is very competitive.
And focusing now on being here in Homestead, what are some of the unique challenges of this track?
Yeah, quite an outlier track, I would say, compared to what we see for the rest of the year. The surface is very different here, super wide, as we can see from the camera feed now. So just quite a potential outlier track. We know that not a lot of people have been here much, so it's also new for everybody in that context. So I think managing the tyre, we know from an energy point of view, it's a race which definitely is more up there in terms of being energy challenging. So I think it's going to create an exciting race today.
Thank you so much, James. Best of luck for the weekend, and back to you, Tom.
Thank you, James. Thanks to Alexa down in pit lane there as well. So good start to the weekend for Jaguar. Let's see how they are able to progress. Whilst we were listening to James Barkley there, we saw Taylor Barnard, and he was on the ragged edge. James, he's a man with a lot of confidence.
I mean, last time out, we saw him getting his elbows out battle. We've seen him on the podium a few times, but the lap he just put in there, he cut the grass at turn 1, overall the curbs. I mean, Billy was just saying he's throwing it around like he's in a go-kart, and he's full of confidence, and the lap time is there.
Yeah, it's really impressive to see. I mean, if you remember back to Jeddah when he got himself onto the podium in that great battle with Jake Hughes, it was in qualifying where we were so impressed. Whoa, big moment there for Nico Muller, and into the wall at turn 11, knocks the front wing, and I wonder if he's done a bit of suspension damage there as well. It's left a bit of debris on the circuits.
Yeah, the front right is towing in quite a lot. I think that's going to be a tricky one. Hopefully he hasn't damaged his front powertrain. For the boys to replace that.
So red flag is now out due to the debris that's on the circuit. Roger Griffiths looking, well, as pragmatic as I'm sure he can in circumstances such as that, because it's going to disrupt not only his running, he's still counting down. But time, there is a possibility.
There is it. It looked like it was going wrong quite early, and he. Okay. So it's up very early. Just hung on.
There, and that compromises. It's not significant damage for him in the end. For that a couple of hours until we get quali underway. The car now being wheeled back into the garage.
Yeah, and that front powertrain is quite difficult to access for the mechanics. So for them to, if it is a problem with it, it will be very complicated for them to replace it, even given the time windows. They'll be quite up against the block.
Now, fingers crossed there for Nico Müller and, as we said, for the Andretti team. Clock still continues to count down as the marshals clear the debris on the circuit at the moment. You can see currently Taylor Barnard fastest ahead of the two Mahindras. And the marshals now just collecting the debris, making sure this track is safe so that when the session does resume, nobody goes out and gets a puncture, causing any further possible safety problems. See here Maximilian Günther, winner from Jeddah, being wheeled back into the garage as well. So looking at a red flag like this, Billy, what does it do from a driver's perspective in terms of disrupting your session, disrupting your rhythm? Because drivers would have been on certain run plans and now they're going to have to rethink it.
Yeah, but also I think a lot of it, we were at that crossover point in the session where a lot of drivers were about to go into 350 kilowatts. They're about to do their first proper push laps on that. We've only got, by the looks of it, about the top 5 drivers that have used 350 kilowatts. Taylor Barnard obviously leading the way by a good chunk, but at least it gives a reference for the other drivers. They know in the remaining time they've got what the benchmark is, where maybe there was time on the table with your Eduardo Mortara, Nick De Vries, where are those 4 attempts that you're missing to the Neon McLaren of Taylor Barnard? So they'll just be crunching numbers, they'll be figuring out any balance issues that they feel like they had in the car. It might actually help some drivers if they were struggling, just have that bit of a break to reset and get back on the right track.
Yeah, it gives the guys a bit of a chance to reset, have a chat with their engineers, discuss the remaining time, their run plan, discuss what they've achieved, how they're feeling, who's confident, who's not, if they need to make a change, if they need to change the tyre pressures. So it does give you a little opportunity to have a chat with the team and maybe optimise more of these final 15 minutes that we're going to see.
Yeah, session due to restart in just under 30 seconds or so's time. So this is the working pit lane that you can see here.
Okay, Sam, so just a quick update. Not many cars have done 350 laps. Taylor's lap was his first lap, he did a 23.9. The lap that you...
So they're just talking about the lap time that Barnard sets, and still a good amount of time for Bird to improve.
Yeah, if you're Sam Bird, you're going to be a bit worried at that gap. I mean, that is a monumental gap. It's a Max Verstappen-sized gap at the moment between Taylor and his teammate.
It was interesting to listen to the psychology of how, the driver and engineer were communicating them, because although Taylor has done a 23.3 now, the first lap was referenced that it was a 23.9, so he was almost bringing that gap down to only a few tenths for Sam, his engineer there. So that for me is the psychology of making sure the driver's still high on confidence and not getting too worried.
Yeah, but at this point, I'd rather know the truth. I'd rather know, shit, I'm 8 tenths off.
Yeah,
but.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things, isn't it, with Sam Bird? He's not had a podium. Apologies for the language in the commentary box, by the way.
We're very passionate over here.
We certainly are. Yeah, it's been over a year since his last podium, Sam Bird. When we were in Sao Paulo, in Brazil, of course, you took that emphatic victory with Mitch Evans, this man here, and very impressive though it was, he's not had the same form since then. I know last year was disrupted because of the injury. He was out for a couple of race weekends and so on, but it's one of those where. You've got to look at it and think, well, Barnard on the other side of the garage is second in the championship. He's come in as a fresh face, a rookie, and he's delivering those performances. So, Bird now needs to step up his game and try and deliver as well. Yeah,
I think for Sam, like you say, it's been a bit of a patchy form season over the last year and this year. He's had moments where you feel like he's back and he's got performance within him. I'm obviously thinking back to Brazil last year. I mean, that victory was incredible, but yeah, it just needs to come more consistently for Sam.
Yeah, certainly does. So you see the green flag is out, drivers now back out onto the circuit and immediately beginning a push lap here then for Nick Cassidy. Currently mired down in 18th fast. Let's have a look at his run through the first corner, because you can see there the grass has been dug out and it's actually a big old bump going through there now as well. But you can also see, as he's on this attack mode lap, that he's really fighting the car. Lots of turns and movements on the steering wheel coming through these corners on the infield section in particular. Building speed okay. What's his first sector time looking like? It's a personal best there, but a couple of tenths away from Barnard here. Cassidy there just clipping the grass on the outside. He's aborted the lap straight away, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's bailed out of that one. It really looked like he was fighting the car. He was having to be really aggressive with his inputs there, Nick Cassidy. So, again, I feel like when we see Nick at his best, he looks like he's at one with the car. He's not really fighting it. So I don't know if there's still more work to do in terms of getting the balance right there.
I don't know if it's tyre preparation as well at this point, because, I mean, he was fighting. It did not go anywhere where he wanted it to go in the first part of that lap. And he was a few tenths off in sector 1. And, yeah, running wide, going onto the grass. It's got a bit to do still, I think, to put that one together.
Yeah, it is interesting. Is it? How, in terms of your driving style, do you have to change from driving a rear-wheel drive car to a four-wheel drive car here, James? You've spent extensive amounts of time in Formula E cars on simulators in the real world as well. You know, when you go from rear-wheel drive to four-wheel drive, how do you have to adjust that style?
The first thing is you actually have to brake a little bit earlier, because you're going from 300 kilowatts to 350. So you're arriving at the corner faster, so you have to brake a little bit earlier, normally about 5 meters. Then you've got the complication of what is the car balance going to do when you go on throttle, and you want to commit hard to the throttle when you're getting on it. And in these long corners, it's something that we're finding is new for them here at this track in Miami. So I think that's why we saw Nick push wide, because once you accelerate with the front tyres as well as the rear tyres, you're going to get a bit more understeer. I think that's a challenge that we're going to see all the drivers facing when they take that step from the 300 kilowatt rear wheel drive to 350 attack mode with the four wheel drive. You're going to see a different balance, and the drivers finding different complications really to complete their laps.
Just heard some team radio from Tictum in the commentary box saying that he's struggling with grip everywhere. This is down into that chicane, and that's similar to what Nico Müller did there, but thankfully he managed to go down the escape road.
Yeah, that's the approach that James said that potentially Nico should have looked at when he started to lock up, in terms of bailing out of that corner, making that call early, so you don't end up being in between, you know, two different scenarios and finding the wall, the concrete wall at that as well.
Yeah, as a driver, you know as soon as you go to turn in, if you've overcommitted, you know. So, and that was a great example of Dan relying on his talent to abort right there.
Well, you can see the work ongoing inside the Andretti garage here for Nico Müller. Müller, interestingly, has stayed in the car, so he's hoping to at least try and get out before the end of the session. It will probably only be an installation lap if they're able to do so, but it's one of those where you just want to make sure all systems are working and you're not going into qualifying with a bit of an unknown quantity. Anyway, Taylor Barnard currently fastest. 15 minutes of the free practice 2 session left at the moment. Let's go down to pit lane again with Alexa. She's catching up with team principal Ian James.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. And as you said, Taylor currently sitting fastest on the timesheets. How delighted are you with the way he's just settled into the team, and what is it that you think makes him so successful so quickly in Formula E?
I think the attitude that we've seen throughout, and we've said time and again, just the way that he worked with the team as our test and development driver, our reserve driver as well, and the approach that he's shown then is exactly the same approach that he shows now. He's got the race seat, and it's just that way he interacts with the team, but also the natural talent that he's got is phenomenal.
And I remember you saying back in Jeddah that you think him and Ollie Rowland especially are born karting style of drivers. They have that way of taking the car around the track. Do you think that's actually helping him out here as well?
Yeah, I think it is, and I think the style of racing that we're seeing in Gen 3, I mean, he's not afraid to get his elbows out, which is good, so he's holding his own out on the track, and I think that's going to be crucial this weekend. It's going to be particularly energy sensitive, so the style of racing we're going to see means that you're going to need those kind of karting skills, and I think that's what we're seeing with both Ollie and with Taylor as well. It's really playing to their strengths.
And Sam currently sitting a few tenths off of Taylor. Do you think he's going to find that challenging, having someone so young coming in and almost putting him right into the challenge?
No, not at all. I mean, it's always good to have some healthy competition within the team, but actually the lap that we saw from Sam was pretty decent. He got caught up with some traffic, which really sort of compromised it. So, no, from what we can see in the sector times, I'm not concerned at all, and he had a great FP1 yesterday, so I think it's all to play for.
Thank you so much, Ian. Good luck this weekend, and back to you, Tom.
Thank you very much indeed, Alexa. Thank you to Ian James there as well. So, one moment.
I don't know what you've done to this car since the brake, but it just won't brake.
Not the feedback you want your driver to give to your race engineer. I don't know what you've done to this car overnight, but it's not the same car, essentially, is what Oliver Rowland is saying there.
He was saying since the break. And, you know, we touched on it earlier in the session where they've had 8 weeks. You can change a lot of the systems and the software inside the car that controls the braking, the torque balance between the front and rear axle. And there, you know, Oliver confirming that he's really struggling, and he was struggling yesterday. And he's 4 tenths behind Taylor. He's clearly had a go at the attack lap, and that's not where he needs to be.
No. Do you think that's down to the fact that it's a car-related issue, or do you think everyone else has just improved? I mean, I suppose the argument is that, you know, the Nissan powertrain is in the back of the McLaren, so
but the software is different. The software, the way that they control the torque balance between the front and rear axle, you know, McLaren would have gone one way, I'm sure, and Nissan would go the other. That's the one thing where the teams can really differentiate, you know, is that torque balance, the way that they apply the different software solutions, let's say, to the problems that you find in this championship.
See Da Costa fighting the steering wheel here, Billy. He's just soaring away at it, isn't he?
Yeah, he's having a real few good goes at it. Now we go into the chicane where we've seen a few issues already. How does he handle it? Looks very neat and tidy, I'd say, compared to the rest. It looked like he left a little bit of margin there, James, on the entry. Didn't push the entry, focused on rolling the minimum corner speed there.
Yeah, I think the minimum speed is key. I think the drivers are getting sort of drawn into that late braking there. They're not going to find the lap time they're looking for. It's going to be minimum speed and exit with the long straight on the way out of there.
So Da Costa then onto the banking, onto the start-finish straight. Even the start-finish straight is not flat. There is still a degree of banking to it. As we come over the timeline now, with Jean Verne currently 17th fastest, but he's on a personal best, goes up into 10th quickest. Nicely done there for Jev. Of course, on the other side of the garage, we saw Max Günther taking victory in Jeddah. Verne, not victorious since Hyderabad in 2023. So he'd love to be able to open his checkbook in 2025 with a strong result. And I mean, if you consider he was one of the original drivers in Formula E to race back in Miami some 10 years ago. I know we were on a different circuit back then, but yeah, it'd be good to see him do well here this weekend.
Yeah, but he's still 1.1 seconds off Taylor Barnard at the moment. I mean, the gap that Taylor has at the front is massive.
4 tenths of a second is massive in this championship, isn't it?
We're used to seeing hundredths of a second, and to see 4 tenths is really quite spectacular.
Let's have a look here on board then with Verne coming through the final corner. You can see him lots of applications of the steering wheel there, just trying to fight for control and a big old amount of compression. What does it look like compared to Zane Maloney in the same series of corners?
It's an interesting couple of corners, those last couple, because they're almost like you get tricked into, you want to roll as much speed through the right hand there before the left, but it's only a short run and the exit is really critical, so it's kind of a balancing act. I think with a lot of these corners, longer apex, entry to exit, it's difficult to get right.
After this push 350, we'll have the choice for a double cool once more.
So, race engineers talking to Pascal Wehrlein there, reigning world champion. Pascal Wehrlein currently 8th in the driver standings at the moment. Hasn't been a particularly brilliant start to the year for him, and well, we've not seen him on the podium at all so far. Of course, I know he's had some very unlucky misfortune when we look at Sao Paulo, ended up on his side in spectacular style, but yeah, he needs to have a strong weekend here in Miami to try and kick off his championship challenge, really, for 2025, because it's not been particularly brilliant on that side of the garage so far.
No, you could hear Fabrice there telling Pascal, if we go for the push lap now, we've got enough time to have a double cool, and that just shows that the tyres are becoming a bit of an issue as it gets hotter this morning. And if he can cool them down for 2 laps and go again at the end for a big push, but it looks like Pascal's going to get quite close here to Taylor.
So, just under 10 minutes now left of free practice 2. We saw Nico Müller ending up in the wall, bringing out the red flag earlier on in the session. We know the team are working very hard on the car at the moment. Let's get down to Alexa, who's catching up with team principal Roger Griffiths, and see if we can get an update on the situation there for Nico.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. We've just seen Nico get out of the car down here. I wonder, Roger, can you tell us what the current extent of the damage on the car is?
Yeah, I mean, it's not excessive damage, but it's more than that we can repair in the remaining time of the session. So we had to make the decision to take Nico out the car, allow the mechanics to get it up in the air properly, and you know, do a proper repair in getting the car ready for qualifying rather than rushing to get it out to try and finish off the session. So obviously disappointing that we don't complete the session on the racetrack, but we completed in the garage. But you know, we'll be good to go for qualifying, so no concerns there.
And can you explain to us from your perspective what actually caused the crash in the first place?
I mean, not seen the data, but I would say from observation, probably Nico was a little late on the brakes. It was his first time at 350 kilowatts, so approaching speed was a bit higher than he'd been used to, so maybe a little bit of a misjudgment from his side.
And how does this kind of set you up for the rest of the day, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's never ideal. I mean, we don't get that much running here. He hasn't had a chance to complete a 350 kilowatt lap now going into qualifying. So you know, obviously the focus is on the group stages, getting through the group stage, and then, you know, once you're into the duels, you're starting no worse than 8th. So I think he's pretty happy at 300 kilowatts. So yeah, we'll see what we've got from there. And obviously Jake's out there performing, and Nico's getting some good data from Jake's car that he can look at. So no, I mean, yeah, it's not ideal, but we'll move on.
Best of luck, Roger, for the rest of today. Thank you. Back to you, Tom.
Thanks, Roger. Thanks, Alexa. Yeah, difficult times there for Nico Müller. A shame for him to end the session early, courtesy of the mistake that he made down into that chicane. But a good opportunity now for the team to try and repair that car fully ahead of qualifying.
A huge challenge. I mean, not doing a single 350 attack lap and going into qualifying, he's going to be massively on the back foot. And not only that, his teammate won't have the data to compare to him to find those last couple of tenths.
He didn't even do a 350 kilowatt lap yesterday in free practice 1 either, so that just adds to the difficulties he's going to face in qualifying.
Yeah, not ideal at all there for Nico Müller. Here's Sean McGill, Jake Dennis's race engineer. We just saw Dennis going up to 3rd quickest. That's a bit more like it. It's interesting, actually, because the lap times were sort of beginning to plateau a little bit a few minutes ago. Now they seem to start heading in the right direction, and we're seeing a few quicker lap times coming in. What do you think that's down to, Billy? Do you think that's down to drivers just sort of overheating their tyres at that stage of the session, is why we saw the drop-off, and now they're getting it back into the right window?
I think also just the disruption of the session, having that red flag. I feel like, you know, we saw some drivers making mistakes and almost complaining about the balance of their car, feeling like it was different. So it feels like, you know, between engineer and driver, they've now got the tyres back in the right window. They've now got back into their own rhythm behind the wheel. And I think just naturally, as we get towards the end of this session, we're going to start to see more representative lap times. But Taylor Barnard still leading the way, still setting the benchmark. I think if you're Taylor Barnard, even if you get pipped at the end of this session by another driver, you're still going to be so high on confidence because you've led this session for such a long period of time, and you probably know, okay, I didn't set a lap time towards the end where everyone else was putting in their best lap times. Could there have been more?
Mortara and Mahindra looking pretty handy at the moment. 5th quickest for Mortara. He comes across the timing line, loses a bit in the final sector, so doesn't improve. Stays 5th quickest at the moment, but his teammate Nick de Vries also up there in 8th place as well. There's Fred Bertrand, the team principal and CEO of Mahindra. Good resurgence of performance over the last year or so for that team. If you remember back to season 9, they were properly down in the doldrums, car cutting out left, right and centre, and all sorts of technical issues, and they really turned it around last year, continuing that forward momentum. They're not expecting podiums this year, but if they can get consistent top 5s, you never know in Formula E, do you, James? You've got to be in the right place at the right time.
No, you do. I mean, with the race that we're going to see later on today, with such an energy-dependent race, I think it's anyone's game, but you're going to have a great car underneath you to deliver in qualifying, and that's what's really going to matter today.
In terms of qualifying, how relevant is it going to be for the race? Do you think it's going to be critical, or do you think because of the high energy pack racing where we've seen drivers cycling through the field that you can get away with it if you don't necessarily have such a good run?
You're going to want to be starting the top 8, mainly because you stay out of trouble, and also you can be so efficient in those first few laps, because if you're in the pack and you're anywhere further back really than the top 8, you're going to struggle to maintain your minimum speeds. Therefore, you're going to burn more energy to stay on the back of the pack. So it's going to be an interesting one to see who has a difficult qualifying and kind of tries to cycle through to get to the front to avoid that concertina effect where that becomes very inefficient. So yeah, top 8, ideally top 6 is where you want to be.
Yeah, the pinch point down the first corner is very prominent. I mean, we've seen drivers threading the eye of a needle here on these hot laps here, Billy, but if you consider 22 Formula E cars in about 6 hours time are going to be barreling down towards T1, it's yeah, it's going to get pretty tight, isn't it?
I can't picture them all making it through and every single part of all the cars being intact, to be honest, because it really does narrow down. We've got David Beckman's on board going through this first part of the lap. Oh, okay, so interesting there, because he didn't actually run properly onto the grass there, but it's almost like where all the dirt's been, you know, dragged onto the circuit. If you have any steering lock or just the wrong amount there, it does catch you out and it does send the car into a bit of a slide.
I think he just took it a little a bit, but we saw Taylor take a lot of grass, and Taylor's approach kind of worked out better for him because the hole was almost in the middle of his car.
You can square the steering wheel up almost if you use it, or you can always just commit, keep the steering wheel as straight as possible. So again, all the drivers will be after this session looking at onboards, looking at what other drivers are doing in that part of the circuit where they are running into issues and seeing, okay, if Taylor Barnard is putting half his car on that and it's working for him, that's what I need to go out there and do. But they want to do that learning ideally before qualifying now.
Well, superhero save there for David Beckman at the first corner. Nicely done for him. Sits 11th quickest at the moment. You can see Vern on full attack mode lap at the moment then. So 350 kilowatts of power and four-wheel drive underneath him. It's going to be a big improvement in time and hopefully in position. Still 8/10 of a second away. Just creeps inside the top 10. We saw the virtual race engineer pop up a few moments ago saying low track evolution. If you consider it's a bit cooler this morning, track conditions there inherently means that time should be a bit faster. We were 1:23.7 in FP1 yesterday. We're 1:23.3, so half a second or so. I mean, if you consider other circuits, we have seen it evolve quicker between those two sessions, haven't we?
Yeah, I think the temperatures are definitely playing their part in terms of not allowing this circuit that, you know, is a little bit green. It's not properly rubbered in yet. I think because we've got those low temperatures, we're not getting all the rubber going down. The grip levels aren't really dramatically improving at this point in time. Qualifying, I think, especially when we get to the latter stages, the duels, I think that will be where we see a big chunk of track evolution, to be honest.
Only 3 drivers in the pits. The rest of the circuit pretty congested at the moment. Verline, of course, and now, we know Nico Miller's not going to be making it out because of his car being repaired. Dak has also just come into the pit lane. Antonio Felix da Costa currently sitting second fastest. Here is Jake Dennis on the other side of the Andretti garage. This is looking a bit more like it here for Jake Dennis. He's just starting to build himself up to a final flying lap then in this session. And well, Jake will be hoping for a return to the rostrum. Last time he was on the top step of the podium was Diriyah last year, so it's February 2024, the last time that we saw Dennis taking a victory.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. I think it's great to see him regaining some form.
Next lap is push. Prepare scenario 8 for single push 300.
So interesting enough, Taylor's going for a push 300. Now I think why the team are doing it this way, and he's done his 350 laps earlier, is because push 300 is what you need to get through the group stages in order to get to the duel. So the team are really setting him up, giving him the best possible chance to make it through and, you know, fulfill his potential here this weekend. It seems pretty immense.
Well, he's done some incredible performances in qualifying, hasn't he? We know he's able to pull it out of the bag, and you can see just the way he's driving that car, Billy. He just exudes confidence. He's got no fear at all.
Yeah, he's completely hustling the car around the circuit, which in Formula E I think is necessary, especially when we get to these wider circuits where minimum corner speeds are really important. He's not afraid to really roll the speed in, be late on the brakes, you know, push the entry, push the minimum corner speed, push the exits. But also I think what Taylor's coming into the season being a rookie, what he's got in his locker is he's got the ability to just be a bit overconfident, be a bit naive almost in a way, and if he makes mistakes, he's not getting too hung up on them.
Yellow flag down at the first sector. I think Vern may have come to a brief stop looking at our track map here in the commentary box. Looks like he's gotten going again, so hopefully that yellow flag disappears. But that is going to thwart any drivers who were on push laps at the end of this session. Stoffel van Dorn was, as was Maximilian Günther. Günther down some 3 seconds off the pace at the moment. Checkered flag is now out, so these will be the final times set. Barnard's already taken the checkered flag, as has Jake Dennis. Van Dorn starting to improve, but still half a second away there in this middle sector. Günther also improving, but you can still see he's a couple of seconds shy of Barnard's time, so they're not going to be troubling the top 10 in this session, possibly for Van Dorn if he's able to hook it up in this final sector of the lap. But we'll see what happens for him as he comes across the timing line. Van Dorn does just sneak into the top 10 for Maserati MSG at the end of FP2. Günther, as we saw, he was a couple of seconds away, and he's only 18th fastest, so that's not the end to the second practice session that the German driver would have wanted. Now the other drivers coming to the timing line then here as well, so they'll finish their laps, come round, do a practice start here. Interestingly, Nick Cassidy, you're just pointing to the timing screen there, Billy, down in 17th place, considering he was top of the pile yesterday. That's a bit of a come down on form, 1.6 seconds slower.
Yeah, it's not exactly gone to plan for him, especially when he's looking to the other side of the garage and seeing Mitch Evans in 4th. I guess that will ease a little bit of the pressure, knowing that the car has got seemingly more pace than what we've seen in the first few races, especially over one lap. But again, as a driver, you just want to be the side of the garage that's been able to deliver that performance. So it just leaves a slight question mark there for Nick Cassidy.
So that's Vern rolling back into pit lane. So he's not doing a practice start. So I think he did come to a stop in that first couple of corners. Let's have a look. Did he have a moment? Oh, he had a spin straight off.
Yes, he had a spin. So that was the end. We do have to have a quick off because we are going straight to Formula 1 on JB Motorsports. So we will going to have to dive off a bit. But Taylor Barnard, is on top of the FP2 session with Da Costa in second and De Vries having a good one in third. The rest of your order is on your screen then. You can join us later on for qualifying to see if Barnard can keep up his good form ready for qualifying later on. From all of us here on JB Motorsports, take care. Bye-bye.